you. So 5G is the theme of the morning, and I think that in the short term, I'm sure from the evidence that you've seen from multiple speakers, that 5G is the most pressing existential threat, which is really has helped us to prove that Extinction Rebellion is controlled opposition, because they have stated categorically that 5G is not a concern. And in fact, they have started blocking people from their social media who try to get 5G raised for discussion. And they say, no, our issue is purely climate change. So what I'm going to do through this, my hour or whatever, 3 hours, however long I feel, is really sort of share some of the things with you that help raise this in the community. Because what Mark has provided you with is the technical data. And I mean, obviously that's Mark's speciality. And there's not many people, Mark, Barry Trower, maybe one or two others, who at the moment have the depth and the breadth of the technical knowledge to be able to take this into the community. But that doesn't mean to say that we can't do that. And in fact, John Kitson, wherever he is John there? Okay, John has put together an excellent presentation on 5G. And the more people that we have who can take this out into the community, present it in their own way, with their own focus, but the more people that can do it, then obviously the quicker that we get the awareness out there. And the thing is that, the first presentation in the community is simply sowing the seed. And then, often it can work for somebody to go back a couple of months later, and build on what was initiated. So what I'm going to do is really share with you some of the things that I have found help communities to come to the realization, even if they walk into the room going, well, this is a crock of crap, isn't it? This is just another rampant conspiracy. But, by the time they leave the room, at least you've sown sufficient seeds for them to go away and do their own research. And I know there's the ladies from Wales still here. When I did the talk in St Dogmaels, which is a little village with a massive village hall, and they said, we're expecting about 200 people or so. And I thought, okay, we'll see. It's a village outside to Carmarthen. But people came from Aberystwyth, from Swansea, from all over, and a couple from Bristol as well. And the village hall was absolutely rammed. So, you guys did an amazing job in publicizing that. So what I'm going to do with you is share some of the information that perhaps helps people come to the realization that we are under attack in a big way. But I'm going to start with an event that took place, or events that took place just over a decade ago in Bridgend in South Wales. Anybody remember this? Yeah? Heard anything about it recently? No, of course not. There was a spate of suicides in Bridgend. This is actually not 2018, it's 2008. But in Bridgend, there was a spate of suicides, and there has never been an explanation. And of course, this is what happens when something occurs and the government really doesn't want anyone to know the real cause of things, so they just don't do an investigation, because if there's no investigation, then it's just speculation, isn't it? Well, there were two independent researchers who decided that they would go and take a look, one of whom was an EMF specialist, and that was Barry Trower, and one of whom was an alternative health practitioner. And they went with different focuses. Well, Barry came up with the observation that each of the suicides, up to the point when he went to Bridgend, each of those suicides lived within 80 meters of a phone mast. Now, back then it would have been 2G, I think. So they lived within 80 meters of a phone mast. But the health practitioner came up with a very interesting observation, and that was that each of the suicides was either on or had recently come off a course of Ritalin. Right? They're one of the most pernicious drugs targeted at adolescents, because basically it screws them right up. And Ritalin, even the pharmacologists don't really understand how it works, because it has a different effect on the developed brain than on the developing brain. On the developing brain, it basically turns the person who's taking them into a zombie. For the developed brain, it acts like cocaine. And there's a professor at Manchester University, Professor John Smith, that name again. Oh, no, it's John Harris. It's John Harris. So Professor John Harris. And every so often, he gets articles in the mainstream media promoting the idea that Ritalin should be made freely available, well, not free, but available over the counter of colleges and universities around the country, because it enhances concentration. So, I mean, consider the possibility that it's actually a combination of the two. You know, the Ritalin, which we know messes up the brain chemistry, and maybe the EMF on top of that. But it's pure speculation because there's no study. So, you know, suicide is not something you can catch. The mystery behind a small Welsh town of Bridgend where 23 men committed suicide in 1 year. And this is an article from 2017. I love this one. The official number of suicides in the spate, which the Welsh Assembly classified as taking place 2007-2008, was 23. However, the deaths continued far beyond that time frame, and reports suggest that in the 5 years to February 2012, 79 people took their lives in the wider county borough of Bridgend. There were rumours of an internet suicide cults and pacts, and even a conspiracy theory that suggested young minds had been damaged by radio frequencies. And that's as close as that got to being put into the mainstream media. Worryingly, no one knows why it happened, and the government certainly doesn't want anyone to know. And of course, more recently, we've seen the spate of suicides at Bristol University. And in fact, one of the officers of the National Union of Students, who was based in Bristol and was asking the right questions, he basically had his membership of the course that he was studying cancelled, and he's been kicked off of the campus because he was asking the right questions. So the backdrop to this year's exam season, as sadly with the last, is mounting concern about student mental health. In the frantic 3-week revision period running up to the end of the year exams, 3 Bristol University students have died suddenly. There have now been 10 student deaths in a little over 18 months, a number of which have been confirmed as suicide. Well, you know, what's interesting is that each of those suicides were resident in an area on the Bristol campus very close to the laboratories that were participating in the 5G tests. University of Bristol, 5G test networks. There you go. And this is what Bristol University have to say about their test bed. A world-class 5G technology test network is aiming to put Britain at the forefront of the next wave of mobile technology, potentially adding up to 173 billion to the economy by 2030. Well, of course, that is an observation that may well be correct, because if you actually manage to accelerate the passing of those who are no longer useful to the corporatocracy, whether they be retirees, whether they be, you know, the sick and the disabled, but just taking them out of the equation so that there's no benefits, there's no healthcare costs, there's a very real possibility that it could add 173 billion to the economy if you're that myopic. So, you know, there's a lot of potential here for doublespeak. The University of Bristol's Smart Internet Lab, along with the 5G experts, who we're going to come to them, at the University of Surrey and King's College London, have been awarded 16 million by the Department of Digital Culture, Media and Sports to develop a cutting-edge 5G test network. The universities will work together to create 3 small-scale mobile networks which will form the test network. The 5G UK test beds and trial program will deliver an end-to-end trial in early 2018, testing the capability of 5G to make an application or service work in a real-world environment. But no mention of the potential harm. And you won't, because universities in the UK are becoming very much like universities in the US, and they're dependent on corporate funding. And if you ever looked at the salaries and the compensation and benefits packages that the chancellors of these universities receive, I mean, it's outrageous. I mean, even the chancellor of... Is there anybody here who graduated from Leicester Montfort University in Leicester? Yeah, in Leicester. Anybody? No? Okay. So anybody, even the chancellor of a third-rate university like Montfort in Leicester, a former polytechnic that got upgraded to a university, you know, in the Blair years, when they needed students to pay. You know, a student wasn't motivated to pay if they were going to a polytechnic, but change it to a university, and, oh yeah, 9,000 a year? That'll do nicely, Gov. So they are reliant more and more on corporate funding. And of course, he who pays the piper. Yeah. So funnily enough, they completely ignore anything that might be detrimental to them retaining their corporate funding. Here we go. You know, this is an antagonistic website, perhaps, that asking the right questions. Student suicides. Is microwave radiation its technologies to blame? Very sad, no one's looking in the right places nor asking the right questions. 9 students from the University of Bristol committed suicide during the past 2 years. Bristol University's blaming the students themselves. Well, they would, wouldn't they? You know, and they put it down to stress before the exams. And you know, maybe the kids coming to university are not appropriately prepared. Yeah, I mean, it's a combination of factors, and it may well be that the 5G trigger somehow targets those who are most vulnerable. Because it's those who are most vulnerable that those who think they're the rightful rulers want to see disappear. Because they're an expense. They're not considered an asset, they're an expense. So they're considered to be a liability. Here are a few questions any parent or student can ask university administrators. How far away is student accommodation to the main computer suites that house Wi-Fi transmitting and ancillary equipment? How far away are the Wi-Fi hotspot antennas in relation to the accommodation building? Please ask administrators if they're aware that exposure to microwave radiation from 900 megahertz and upwards is biologically dangerous, because we now have clear evidence that exposure to microwave radiation induces rare brain tumors, heart cancers, etc., etc. So some good counsel. Some good counsel. But do you think students are really going to, who want to go to a particular university, can do this? It won't affect me. Oh God, have we got some education to do? Ex-military, and this is, again, something that is happening to ex-military and even serving military personnel all around the world. Back in 1991, it was put down as Gulf War syndrome, i.e. the vaccinations that every serviceman who was sent to the Gulf to evict Saddam Hussein and his troops from Kuwait was vaccinated with these toxins against supposed chemical attacks by the Iraqi army. But consider the possibility that the subsequent trauma, depression, suicides was actually triggered by their exposure to battlefield technology, or again, a combination of. And certainly in the UK, and I'm very pleased and proud to have had ex-military servicemen as part of the anti-fracking community over the last few years. And, sadly, when you talk to them about their experiences and you talk to them about their state of health, it's not good. And there is an acknowledgement now from these guys that their state of mind may well have been triggered by their exposure to pernicious battlefield microwave technology. So a national charity believes 80 current or former service personnel may have died by suicide in 2018. 5 veterans, 4 serving members are feared to have taken their own lives already this year. When we shone a light on the issue 7 months ago, campaigners urged the government to introduce a system to comprehensively record veteran suicides. But of course they won't. They won't. And the government are incredibly creative when it suits them. Barry Trower, some 2 decades ago, was trying to raise awareness amongst serving police officers of the dangers of the Tetra radio system, the digital Tetra radio system. What Jim Davidson used to refer to as the talking brooch. And, of course, what Barry identified was depending on which side they wore the talking brooch, determined which side the tumours started to manifest. So the police occupational health service, which was set up, obviously, to help the police, specialists who were used to dealing with police trauma, and they were starting to realize that there was a problem, because they had access to all the data from all the serving police officers, and they realized that there were clusters of these cancers. And they were starting to get a little bit curious about the relationship between these tumors and cancers that were emerging based on the side of the body that they were wearing this digital radio. Do you know what the police did? They disbanded the occupational health service so that the police would have to go to their own GPs, and there would be no centralized database, so nobody would pick up the fact that this was related to the technology.
And it changed the whole federation that the police actually worked with, and put in new personnel that knew nothing about it.
Which is standard protocols, yeah. Well, this is a report that goes back to 1972, the Naval Medical Research Institute, and so it's very clear that the US Navy knew very, very well that exposure, certainly extended exposure to battlefield technology, particularly phased array gathering technology like radar, then exposed to that, there was potentially some serious health concerns. And I gather that in the British military, and I have this from first-hand serviceman, and he said, well, that's probably why they're restricting us now to 3-month tours in data gathering centers, like in the data gathering center in Cyprus. You know, they are restricted now to 3-month tours. And perhaps that's an attempt, without actually admitting it, to mitigate the risk of the exposure to the radiation. I'm not going to go through it. This is a freely available document. Naval Medical Research Institute is freely available. You can download it as a PDF. And what you will glean from it is that there was an awareness, what's that, nearly 50 years ago. So let's go to Parliament. And here was a written question put. So, you know, obviously, word was getting through. So this was asked by Mr. William Ragg of Hazel Grove. 5G health hazards written question. To ask the Secretary of State for Digital Culture and Media and Sport what assessment his department has made about the safety of 5G with respect to human health. Now, of course, I'm sure you realise that government ministers are very, very carefully selected. First of all, you have to be a socio-psychopath. There is no possibility of you being able to assume that role unless you have those qualities. You know, obviously, you know, fortunately, we may be on the cusp of seeing a new breed of politician. You know, we've seen a massive resurgence, or surgence even, of the number of independents who have been elected in recent elections. And of course, you know, I think Mads and Gemma epitomise that new breed of politician that wants to go into Parliament or into elected office for the right reasons. And, you know, obviously, we all hope that they don't succumb. Because I know many politicians do go into office with the intent of, well, altruistic intent, doing the right thing. But they very quickly realise that the only way they can survive in this environment is to become a sociopath. And sadly, that's what happens. Anyway, here was the department's response. 5G, and you don't expect this to say anything, do you, really? No? 5G is the latest evolution of mobile communication technologies and currently in the development stages. 5G is likely to be deployed as part of a patchwork of technologies, including those already in use, such as advanced LTE, blah, 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 blah. The government expects that existing UK technical standards will be adhered to throughout the development of 5G products and keyboards. These standards draw on the International Commission of Non-Ionising Radiation Protection, which takes into account the well-researched effects of radio waves. As 5G continues development, the government is committed to working with Public Health England, who by the way, share a facility with Porton Down. Yeah. Well-researched effects of radio waves, etc., etc. So, you know, you're not going to get a straight answer. It seems like NASA has taken over Parliament, eh? Well, the 5G is being rolled out. You are being told it's only going to be tested in a few areas. This is called a blind. So that you think, oh, that's all right. We're not affected. It's somewhere else. It's not my problem. Except that it's being rolled out everywhere. But you're just being told there's a few test areas. 16 cities. We'll look at them in a second. 16 cities. Test area. But it's being rolled out right across. So what they're going to do is they're going to run the tests for about 5 minutes and say, oh, it works. We'll just switch it on right across the country. And be too late. Let me show you this video. I'm going to show you a couple of videos. This is Ordnance Survey, and this is in particular Ordnance Survey working with Bournemouth City Council on the siting of 5G phone masts. And you know, Ordnance Survey have found a new source of revenue because they're not selling very many maps anymore because we've all got sat-nav, which of course is all part of dumbing down because we're losing the ability for all the skills so that when the technology goes down, you go, oh, fuck, I'm lost. Well, here's a map. What use is that? Do I light fires with it? So Ordnance Survey have found a new revenue stream, which is whoring their services out to the councils and to the telecoms companies to map where 5G phone masts will be. So if I can do a Mads here, guide me down. This is like golden shot. Up a bit, up a bit.
Very well positioned to provide the information and data required to produce what we call a digital twin of the real world.
One of the reasons Bournemouth was chosen is the lay of the land is representative within a small area of the vast area that eventually this would have to cover. Ordnance Survey's role, working with Bournemouth Borough Council and the Met Office, is to model how 5G is going to work, how we can successfully introduce it throughout the United Kingdom.
So the task is to map part of the Bournemouth area to enable us to look at positioning new aerials for 5G technologies to try and identify the best places to deploy these as quickly and effectively as possible. These signals which we're talking about, they're very, very high frequency. And high frequency signals are affected by very small items. So it's important to know where those small items are accurately.
So things like tree canopies, weather, all affect the dissipation of the signal. And so it's really important that we understand the current built environment, but also the emerging built environment.
What you can see on the screen is a red and green pattern. The red is showing where the aerial cannot see anything by line of sight. The green is showing where it can see things by line of sight. So by combining a number of aerials and seeing what their line of sight is, we can cover specific regions knowing that we've got full coverage for the 5G signal in that area.
So precision is absolutely central to this, and Ordnance Survey has precision in its DNA.
No longer is it good enough to say it's 1 or 2 meters away. It's got to be within centimeters, if not less. And with the Ordnance Survey data and our ability to survey at that level of detail, it puts us in an unprecedented situation to provide that level of detail for this work.
I really do think the time of Ordnance Survey has come. Our obsession about precision and about millimetre accuracy is here.
We're on the verge of something amazing. You know, the United Kingdom is an incredible place. We are a brilliant country, and here is yet another example where we are about potentially to lead the world in 5G technology.
Right. Trust me, I'm going to lower my voice by an octave and wear a suit and a tie, and therefore you can trust me. Of course, Brian Gerrish has been making that observation for years, although Brian still, doesn't quite get the tie bit. I have never really understood why a grown man willingly puts a noose around his neck every morning. So I can promise that you will never, ever see me in a tie. I can share that with you later. Yeah. Oh, there we go. Right, let's have another look here. We're going to stay with Bournemouth. And you listen very carefully to some of the things that are being said here. Right, up a bit, right a bit. Nice music. Sorry, I'm imitating Theresa May.
We understand surveying data and we understand the importance of accuracy, repeatability as well, so it's all about quality. Our 3D models are made out of what are called a point cloud. Each one of those points you can identify and put attributes to it, so you can find a lot about the materials it's made of, the surface types, history of that data as well. So they're intelligent 3D models.
Our role in it was really to supply as many data sets as we possibly could for Ordnance Survey for the project. Everything from street lighting and lampposts and bus shelters all the way through to the types of tree growing in Horseshoe Common in the town centre of the Lansdowne.
The data that we provided to our project partners was really important because it filled in one of the key knowledge gaps in the project. The 5G Innovation Centre partners really worked out how radio waves would transmit around that cityscape. And then the Met Office were able to really drop real weather on top of that, just to show exactly how much that might change if it started to rain really heavily.
In terms of the signal propagation, it was really important for Ordnance Survey to be able to understand lines of sight for this project. And obviously, if you have foliage or trees or even hanging baskets in the town centre, that can affect how the signal's transmitted.
To our knowledge, no other mapping technology would be able to do that efficiently. The Ordnance Survey 3D mapping with a high resolution and fast computing of this information, that was unique expertise that brought into the project.
The opportunities are endless having completed this project. Ordnance Survey have got a fantastic opportunity to exploit what we've learnt on the 5G project, not just for 5G, but for other initiatives as well. Digital built Britain, connected autonomous vehicles, Internet of Things, and underground asset. Having good, accurate 3D models just opens up so many doors for the future.
Yes, underground assets, whatever they might be. But you know what she said there? Trees, leaves, and even hanging baskets have an effect on the signature of the signal. Well, we'll take a look at that again in a bit later. Right, trees. Now, this is another blind, by the way. This is because the reality is that all eyes for the last few years have been focused on Sheffield and the campaign in Sheffield by the local community there to prevent their trees being cut down. Now, Sheffield, of course, was a traditional, very industrial town, home of Sheffield Steele. And the trees were planted by the Victorians to try to clean up the pollution using a process that Extinction Rebellion seemed to have dismissed from our ecology, called photosynthesis. Where the trees take the carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and use it for their fuel and food and convert it to oxygen for us to use. So that's why the trees were planted, and these are, quality trees, and, obviously there's experienced tree surgeons and pollarders who can, look after these trees, but this was a mass culling in an agreement, a contract signed between Sheffield County Council and AMI, a Spanish civil engineering company. As you're going to see, AMI is right in bed with Telefonica, which in this country is O2. And it's a little over a year ago that, because I knew that the trees were being cut down for the 5G, but there was nothing really about it in the mainstream media, so I was, really just sort of flying the proverbial kite. There was no traction. And then, believe it or not, that epitome of British journalism, not The Sun, ran an article in March of last year stating that the trees were being culled in Sheffield to clear the pathway for 5G. And I thought, yes, thank you. So the next day on my live stream, I focused on the issue and the relationship of trees and 5G. And of course, immediately, the environmental campaigners of Sheffield said, no, this is a conspiracy theory. They're just trying to take our trees down. No, they're not. They're taking your trees down for a reason. So even now in Sheffield, you have two activist groups. One that's trying to stop the trees, because they love trees, stop the trees culling, that is, and the other one trying to stop the tree culling, because they know it's related to 5G. And basically, there's those of us on the outside saying, look, stop fighting. Ultimately, you're both after the same thing. But you know what? The rabid environmentalists of the far left do not understand compromise. You either buy into everything that they want you to believe, or you're far right. And this is part of the problem. This is part of the polarization. Those that have the capability for discernment, for discretion, and still practice epistemological integrity, which is where basically you don't just regurgitate stuff that's pumped out in the media. You do research it for yourself, and you try and have real knowledge as opposed to just spouting forth what you've been told by or caught up in this emotional campaign to save the climate. So, anyway, the focus was on Sheffield, and the plan was to cull 35,000 trees in the Sheffield environment. But I think they stopped at about 5,000 because of the pressure. 5,000. But while all eyes were on Sheffield, trees were being culled all around the country. And you know where's top of the league? Newcastle, which is right across the river from Gateshead. Gateshead, one on the south of the Tyne, Newcastle on the north of the Tyne, the twin cities. 8,500 trees in the same period that Sheffield culled just over 5,000 trees. But no one knows anything about what's going on in Newcastle, and that's intentional because you keep all eyes focused on the blind of Sheffield. Meanwhile, of course, Network Rail inadvertently slipped up and let it be known that over the next few years they were going to cull about 8 or 9 million trees from the rail network. Why were those trees planted? Well, yes, they were planted to create a screen from the railway line to residential areas because, obviously, back in the days of steam, there was a lot of smoke and soot and ash and everything else, and the trees provided an excellent screen and also did a little bit of the cleansing through photosynthesis. But the trees are there for another reason, because the Victorian engineers knew that when you build embankments to hold the railway line, or you dig cuttings to cut the railway line, you put trees in there to bind the soil. So you know what's going to happen here is the trees are going to be cut, and basically, as soon as we have the next massive downpour, which of course will be created, but as soon as we have that next downpour, then we're going to lose that infrastructure because cuttings are going to collapse and embankments are going to collapse. And I don't know whether the gentleman's still in the audience, I'm not going to name him, but there's a gentleman in the audience who is a specialist in analysing effectively disasters, mechanical disaster, natural disaster, etc. And he's made the observation, he said, we're losing the skills, we're not even teaching the basics in our universities. What we're teaching as degree level now was basically high school level, a generation ago. And so kids are coming out of university with a degree, and then once upon a time, if you wanted to go into a profession, you had to start at the grassroots level, and you spent at least a couple of years learning the basics. Now, you're straight in as a department manager with zero knowledge and with zero experience, and so this is what's happening. The fellings in Sheffield are part of a 25-year, £2.2 billion public-private finance initiative contract signed in 2012 between the Labour-led council and private company AMI, the Streets Ahead programme, intended to upgrade the condition of our city's roads, pavements, streetlights and bridges. No small feat in a place that was known as Pothole City. But whether it was or it wasn't, that's what it's being projected as. The contract has serious implications for the city's 36,000 roadside trees, which have been, in effect, been privatised until the late 2020s. Well, the good news is that there's a moratorium on the tree culling in Sheffield now. But that doesn't mean to say that it's dead and buried, but there's a moratorium. And it just means they turn their attention somewhere else. So here we go, Amy, and you don't have to look very far to find the clues, but you do have to look. Our decision to work with Telefonica UK, O2, as our strategic supplier across mobile, fixed voice, and manage wireless area network, wide area network services means we are able to consolidate suppliers and work with one partner to help transform communications to a bit blah, 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 blah. In other words, yes, 5G, here we come. Because we need to have, well, we don't need, but they want a 5G transmitter every 300 meters. Every 300 meters. Sunday Times investigation, 110,000 trees lost to councils. Councils cutting them down. Here we go. More than 110,000 trees have been chopped down in 3 years by councils across the UK, equivalent to a sixth of the size of Sherwood Forest. A Sunday Times investigation using Freedom of Information requests has revealed that Sheffield, where the council has caused uproar by felling about 10% of its tree population, is only the third most prolific city at felling. It is exceeded by Newcastle, where 8,500 trees have been felled, and Edinburgh, with 4,435. The figure for Sheffield currently, at the time of this article, is 3,529. But it's every city. It's every community. I mean, there's a place in Cumbria where they had one big tree in the market square, been there for centuries. I mean, it was a local landmark. People used to congregate around there, in the summer and use its shade for their social gathering. Gone. Overnight. So this was from about a year ago, a little over a year ago. Now the search begins for the UK 5G city of the future, making it a competition. The Urban Connected Projects, a key part of the industrial strategy and the next step in the government's 5G testbed trials program, will develop a large-scale citywide testbed for wireless 5G infrastructure. This will include testing how new technology can make urban communities inherently safer, greener, more efficient, all those emotive words, more efficient and more attractive places to live. Really? It is expected that the winning bid will be trialling a variety of initiatives which could include and this is EE to launch the 5G connectivity across 16 cities. Now, EE did us a massive favour because they announced that they were going to provide 5G at Glastonbury Festival this year. And there's been uproar, and obviously the people of Glastonbury, they've been writing to the Evis family, asking them, what's going on here? People have been writing to the Evis saying, look, I've been to Glastonbury every year for the last 10 years or whatever, but I'm pregnant. Are you going to take responsibility if anything happens to my unborn baby when I attend the festival with 5G surrounding it? So, but it's elevated the debate. And here's the 16 cities that were awarded or identified as being the target cities. And of course, Sheffield and Newcastle, funnily enough, right there, because the groundwork is being prepared by the culling of the trees. So I'm going to just give a little bit of background here to some of the things that Mark referred to. This is the University of Surrey, and this is the document that anybody needs to read. And I've pointed this out to the people in Sheffield, and even after I've shown them what I'm about to show you, they go, so what's the link between tree culling and 5G? Well, let's have a look. Because section 3.1 of this report, and you can find this really easily, all you've got to punch into your search engine is University of Surrey 5G trees. And section 3.1, mast height at tree level as a limiting factor on reach and reliability. New ways for local planning authorities to work with mobile network operators offers huge future opportunities for local communities to benefit from a leap forward in rural coverage. In the past, the priority for planning authorities has been to reduce mobile mast height so that masts are visually screened by buildings and/or trees, with trees being the highest and more likely obstruction. However, this also screens the RF signals and has defeated the objective of reliable coverage, as illustrated in Fig 3, which we'll see in a minute. The curves plotted in the diagram showing how increasing the tree height above the line of sight from the base station and further into what is known as the Fresnel zone of the propagation channel would cause substantial diffraction or shadowing loss. To avoid the shadowing loss and be outside the Fresnel zone, it's necessary for the tree height to be at less than 3 meters, to be at least 3 meters less than the base station height. So it seems that we're about to enter a period of apartheid in this country because all of our trees have to be leveled beneath the mast heights. Now, at the moment, the rollout of 5G telecoms is a national infrastructure project. In other words, the telecom companies don't have to seek planning permission to erect a phone mast. So 75 meters in height is the limit for erection of a phone mast in an urban area, and 85 feet is the limit of a height in a rural area. So all the telecom company has to do is gain access to that particular plot of land they need, and then they can just rock up and put the mast in. And what this conveniently tries to get around is the fact that every single local authority, whether it's a local council, district council, county council, every authority has a constitution, and those constitutions are legally binding. They're given to every officer, i.e. those who are the paid professionals of these authorities, and to every elected representative. And I can guarantee you, within those constitutions, and most of them are freely available, you just punch in your local authority and the constitution and download it. The Gateshead one is something like 286 pages, but within that is contained the responsibilities of officers and councillors for the health and well-being of their residents. But because they don't have any role in the siting of the phone mast, and certainly no role in granting or not granting the planning permission, this is their get-out-of-jail-free card. And it's very, very convenient. So we have to find a way to test that. So here we go. And what you heard on that video from that lady from Bournemouth was that trees, leaves, and even hanging baskets have a negative effect on the signal. Well, microwave frequencies are affected by pretty much anything organic. So trees are a problem. Trees with leaves on are a double problem. Trees with leaves with water droplets on are a total block. Total block. And that in a country where, we have, well, depending on where you live, but even in the drier areas, 28 to 30 inches of rainfall a year, obviously up in the north of England and Scotland, then the rainfall is even greater. But the moment that these trees, from late spring to early autumn, the moment these trees have water droplets on them, the 5G won't work, so let's cut them down. And that's the game plan. And it's spelled out in words of one syllable, basically, in this document from University of Surrey. Yeah. Well, you can see that in Leeds. If you go to Leeds, because Leeds also has a lot of trees, and this is going back 10 years now when I was giving a presentation at Leeds University, and the guy that had invited me to give the presentation took me on a walk just around the campus, and he showed me the trees, how all one side was dying, and then pointing out where the foam mast was, and of course the tree was effectively trying to protect the other side of the tree. So one side of the tree dead, and the other one thriving, as you say. So here we have, this is the rule on planning permission. Full national damage of mobile reach and reliability emerges from the data on UK tree heights plotted in this document. And it says that shows that even when the mast is 10 meters tall, there is still a 30% chance of being blocked by trees. At 25 meters, the probability drops to less than 1%. Well, that's where they got the 25 meters from, because that's about 75 feet for the height of the foam masts. So here we go. This is from the town and country planning documentation. Installation of mast, height of mast, which may be installed on unprotected land, is increased from 15 meters to 25, 75 feet, or 20 meters on a highway. And of course, part of the new smart motorway program is the erection of these LED streetlights. And of course, the LED streetlights are effectively the support for the 5G transmitter. And where they want to go is that within a decade, okay, let's be generous, within 20 years, certainly within 20 years, if you are driving a vehicle that does not have the capacity to be switched to automatic mode, you will not be allowed on motorways. Because you cannot have autonomous vehicles and manual-driven vehicles basically on a high-speed road. So they will try it, and then when there's a load of accidents, I use that term loosely, then obviously they'll change the rules and you won't be able to go on motorways unless your vehicle can be switched to autonomous mode. Health considerations? Well, again, you encourage people to do their own research. Research by the independent expert group on mobile phones, the Stewart Group, concluded that the balance of evidence indicates that there is no general risk to health of the people living near to base stations, masts, etc., on the basis that exposures are expected to be small fractions of the guidelines. But it was also concluded that the possibility of harm could not be ruled out with confidence. So this is where the precautionary effect should kick in. That statement alone, as soon as that statement appears in a document, it should be a case of, okay, the precautionary principle is applied, we can't guarantee it, stop. That's the way it should be, but it's not, because the corporations work on the basis, well, if you can't prove it, it must be all right. So why is the planning department unable to take account of health considerations when determining mast proposals? Because the government tells them they can't. Now, you can't take account of that. And what the government is saying is that we will sue you if you try and prevent these phone masts being erected. So is there a minimum legal distance that masts should be located from a property? The government guideline states that local planning authorities should not insist on minimum distances between new telecommunications development and existing development. Now, Mark Steele has proven that the manufacturers of some of the kit being installed in Gateshead states quite clearly that it should not be erected within like 25 feet of any residential or any building that is effectively occupied on an ongoing basis. And yet they're mounting this kit on the outsides of people's bedroom walls. As he says, it's a crime against humanity. So I'm not going to play this. I'm going to, maybe I'll just play the start of it. It's an 8-minute video, so I don't really want it to play the whole lot. But this is Tom Wheeler, who is the epitome of a socio-psychopath. And he was, until Trump came into office, the head of the FCC.
The big game changer is that 5G will use much higher frequency bands than previously thought viable for mobile broadband and other applications. Such millimeter wave signals have physical properties that are both a limitation and a strength. They tend to travel best in narrow and straight lines, and they do not go through physical objects as well. But brilliant engineers have developed new antennas that can aim and amplify signals. Now, to make this work, the 5G build-out is going to be very infrastructure intensive, requiring massive deployment of small cells. I'm confident that the actions will lead to a cornucopia of unanticipated, innovative uses and will generate tens of billions of dollars in economic activity. And that's damn important. The big game changer.
That's damn important. Forget everything else, it's billions of dollars of revenue, and that's damn important. And he goes on, and please, this is freely available on YouTube. It's from nearly 3 years ago. But he makes it clear that nothing should get in the way. And he says, let's not wait for the regulations. Let's just get it out there and get it installed, before anybody realizes what we're doing, basically. Well, this guy, of course, has been realizing what's been going on for a while. And, he's... And there is no question that Mark's commitment to raising awareness of this has been absolutely seminal in getting the level of awareness where it is today in the UK. No question at all. And in fact, I'd never spoken to Mark before I did that live stream from my field in Nottinghamshire a little over a year ago, and I did the presentation in that live stream about the relationship between the trees being culled in Sheffield and 5G. And about 10 minutes after I finished the live stream, my phone rang and it was Mark. Well, of course, at that time, he was being targeted by Gateshead Council, and I invited him to come to... Hello? Oh, just wait. I invited him to come to AV9, and he delivered a great presentation. And then, we got talking and talking about the court cases, and unfortunately, I have a little bit of experience of the courtroom environment. And Mark obviously hadn't got the resources, he hadn't got legal aid, so I offered to assist him as his Mackenzie friend in the forthcoming hearings, the two hearings, the criminal charge, the allegation of effectively terrorizing Gateshead councillors, and then Gateshead Council's attempt to gag him and prevent him asking the hard questions. And I want to share some of the quotes. This is one that the reporter from the local paper took. The quote from Recorder Nolan, the judge presiding, he said, "I'm not going to give you a gagging order, I'm just going to ask you to behave yourself," which meant don't call people murdering whatever. So during the course, I obviously, as a Mackenzie friend, I'm not allowed to speak. I can just advise or offer a bit of input every now and again. Because let me tell you, the most difficult thing is to represent yourself in a courtroom. Let me choose my wording carefully. To present in a courtroom is very difficult because you are emotionally attached, obviously. And I had to work with Mark, and I said, you must try and avoid getting passionate. Well, you can guess how that worked out. But the judge clearly warmed to Mark, and he certainly didn't warm to the authority. And so these were just some of the quotes that he gave verbatim that I took down during the course of the hearing. Mr. Steele is entitled to inform the public, because you've got to remember, all of these comments the judge made were effectively in response to the barrister representing Gateshead Council and trying to get the injunction. And God knows what planet she was living on. I know as a barrister you have to sort of put all your conscience to one side because you're just representing the client. But surely there comes a point where you say, you know what? No, that's not for me. But no, she was a piece of work. Anyway, this is from the judge. Mr. Steele is entitled to inform the public opinion. I think this is very much in the public interest. I can see Mr. Steele has genuine concerns. It wasn't just a case of seeing Mr. Steele had genuine concerns. Mark's bundle was comprehensive. And the judge read that bundle, or at least scanned the key elements of it over the lunch, because the judge came out after lunch with a completely different approach than he'd shown in the morning. So it's very clear he'd read the document. He said, I can see Mr. Steele is very knowledgeable in this matter. Freedom of speech is allowed in this country. Which planet is this judge on? There is nothing wrong with the defendant's campaign as long as it is legal. He's just getting up the council's nose. I'm not going to stop Mr. Steele's campaign. He just needs to behave himself. And this last one was the judge really playing to the public gallery, because he said, this is democracy in action. And the public gallery sort of literally burst out in spontaneous applause, and the judge went, I can assure you, being in court with Mark is not just a courtroom experience, it's entertaining as well. And that's why if you can make it along next Thursday to the moot hall, you won't be disappointed. Okay, and of course, the concerns that Mark is raising about this weapons-grade technology is from one end of the country to the other. And let me tell you that Cornwall's really on the case, because I know that John and we've both had multiple invitations to speak in Cornwall and on the Scilly Isles. But there you go. Well, Hereford's not in Cornwall, but well done. Well done. Because I'm not getting on a helicopter or a boat. I can tell you to go to the Scilly Isles anytime soon. But Cornwall is one of the 2 confirmed test areas for the new 5G phone system. A US professor has called a massive experiment on the health of all species. So, this is out there in the public domain, and I know there's a lot of attention because Cornwall is still an area that has community. And this is what scares the crap out of the establishment. That's why pubs are getting shut down, because they don't want people coming together, in their leisure time and putting the worlds to right over a few beers. A weapons-grade new phone technology, which is being tested in Cornwall, is sparking health concerns after a spate of suicides at Bristol University. See, people are putting the dots together. This is a reporter on the Cornwall Live website, which is effectively the online version of the local paper. Cornwall and Cumbria have been confirmed as test areas for new 5G mobile technology in rural areas. It's been revealed. Public health professor at the University of California has described 5G as a massive experiment on the species. Now, this is a short clip from the Senate on February, I believe it was February the 6th, and it actually is a follow-up event because 2 months previously, on December the 6th of last year, Senator Blumenthal actually grilled the industry as to whether or not there were any studies that they could produce that proved 5G technology to be safe. And they sort of stumbled around a bit. And he said, well, I'll tell you what, I'll give you time. We'll reconvene in a couple of months. So this is the reconvening of that hearing. And listen to this. I think it's pretty self-explanatory, right?
Mr. Chairman, thank you for having this hearing. We've heard from a lot of witnesses from you today and others previously about the very important potential of 5G technology. It promises to bring us a new era of connectivity with internet speeds as much as 5 times faster than what we have today with much lower latency, and that's all a good thing. But 5G, as you well know, also uses higher frequency waves that don't travel as far and will rely on a network of hundreds of thousands, potentially millions of small cell sites. And the question then is, are there any health implications, any public safety implications to those additional sites that are likely to be located close to homes, schools, workplaces, and closer to the ground? Correct?
Correct, Senator. Yes.
So in December of 2018, I sent a letter to FCC Commissioner Carr asking him to cite for me recent scientific studies demonstrating the safety of this technology. What research has been done, where has it been published and compiled. he has essentially failed to do so, and just echo the general statements of the FDA, which shares regulatory responsibility for cell phones with the FCC. If you go to the FDA website, pretty unsatisfactory. There basically is a cursory and superficial citation to existing scientific data saying, quote, the FDA has urged the cell phone industry to take a number of steps, including support additional research on possible biological effects of radio frequency fields for the type of signal emitted by cell phones. I believe that Americans deserve to know what the health effects are, not to prejudge what scientific studies may show, and they deserve also a commitment to do the research on outstanding questions. So my question for you, particularly Mr. Gillen and Mr. Perry, how much money has the industry committed to supporting additional independent research? I stress independent research. Is that independent research ongoing? Has any been completed? Where can consumers look for it? And we're talking about research on the biological effects of this new technology.
Thank you, Senator. I think, thank you for your focus on the issue. Safety is paramount, and as you alluded to, we rely on the expert agencies, we rely on the findings of the FDA and others as to the requirements to keep all of us safe. There are no industry-backed studies, to my knowledge right now. Happy to visit with you as to what opportunities you think there needs to be more studies, and we're always for more science. We also rely on what the scientists tell us.
So essentially, the answer to my question, how much money? Zero.
I can certainly follow up with you, Senator. To my knowledge, there's no active studies being backed by industry today.
Anybody else know of industry commitments to back research, fund it, support it, to ascertain scientifically the health effect?
Senator, I'm not aware either, but I do know that with small cells especially, you're going to have lower power levels. And of course, as from a carrier perspective, you want to be able to manage interference so that that interference is the lowest interference possible. So I would think that some of those studies or some of that information could be utilized in looking at the health consequences. But no, I'm not aware of any.
So there really is no research ongoing. We're kind of flying blind here, so far as health and safety is concerned. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank.
Okay, that was from literally just 3 months ago, right? That is, again, this clip is freely available on YouTube. It's there for all to see. Here is the categoric statement that in the US, they are not aware of any independent studies, and of course this is the school of thought of Ted Wheeler. There are no independent studies which can demonstrate 5G frequencies to be safe. And as Wheeler said, let's not wait for the regulation, let's just roll it out there. Okay, Mark touched on the street lights. Again, I'm just going to show you and explain perhaps a little more why this is the case. Because, you know, people say that the blue light does not cause cancer. Actually, in abstract, that statement is correct. The blue light itself does not directly trigger the cancer. But what the blue light frequencies do is they mess with your circadian rhythm. Once your circadian rhythm has been effectively compromised, then it has an impact on the hormonal balance within the body. Breast and prostate cancers are both due to hormonal deficiency. So you see how they get themselves out of a hole? Because they'll say, oh no, that's a ridiculous statement. Well, in of itself, they might wish to believe that. But actually, the proof, as Mark said, is the joint study between Exeter University and the Institute of Global Health in Barcelona. And Barcelona somehow they managed to find 2 communities to put these street lights in, and they measured the impact on the community of these street lights being put in place. And they established that there was a marked increase in both breast and prostate cancers in those communities. So, yeah, the science is there, and again, the precautionary principle should apply. Now, I do a lot of night driving, and I do wear the yellow glasses because, you'll notice at night, especially if a car with the LED streetlights goes over a bump, then you notice that flash in your mirror. Yeah, well, that's the blue light. If you are using a Android phone, it probably has a blue light filter on it. You need to go into your settings and make sure that blue light filter is on. Because if it's not, then that blue light frequency is doing exactly what this is doing, and it's having an impact on your circadian rhythm, which may be why you find you struggle sleeping if you've been using your phone a bit too close to when you actually go to bed. So, and if you've got a phone that hasn't got that in the settings, then download one. Okay, you can download an app that's a blue light filter. So, I found that as there was more and more of this LED street lighting, when I was getting to wherever it was I was going, then, I basically was tired, but I couldn't sleep. But now I sort of wear, invariably, if I'm driving any distance, particularly down the smart motorway sections, then the yellow glasses are on, and then when I get to where I'm going, then, hey, I sleep as normal. So how do we stop this? Well, community activism, as I said, is what scares them. What we have achieved in the UK with the anti-fracking campaign. And of course, we have effectively the bans or moratoriums in place in Scotland, in Wales, in Northern Ireland, in the Republic of Ireland. But here in England at the moment, the Tories still seem to want to try and push it. But they are thwarted by the community activists. And look at this. I mean, this is not the usual suspects. And you've heard me talk about it over the previous years, and particularly the retirees. Quite possibly the last generation of retirees with reasonable health, financial security, and have time because they're retired. And the group in East Yorkshire who thwarted Rathlin Energy at Crawberry Hill, they referred to themselves as the Jerry activists. And they were, these were people who never got involved in really anything like this in their lives. One was a former NASA engineer, one was the former director of Education and Children's Services of East Riding Council, there's former headmistress, the former leader of Hull City Council. People that never got involved in activism. But what motivated them was that these mother frackers were looking to come into their community, And so, the industry says, oh, they're NIMBYs. Yeah, so what? Not in my backyard. I mean, so what? If that's what motivates people, yeah, absolutely. You're going to motivate people first and foremost if it's likely to affect them. And of course, none of the CEOs of these motherfrackers, none of these CEOs live in the areas that are being targeted for fracking. So anyway, it looks like we're pretty much, the lid of the coffin is well and truly on. It's just a question of getting those nails well and truly hammered home. But so what we're trying to do with 5G is we're using the experiences that we've gained through developing community activism, where, the local community groups, so they're not part of any wider network, not formally anyway, no leadership. I mean, admittedly, there are some who still like to have a chairman, secretary, treasurer. But they very quickly learned that actually that's not really the way to do it, because once you've got a structure, it'll get infiltrated. So keep it fluid. So it just needs to be a loose-knit group of people who are like-minded, and in this case, that's stopping fracking. And of course they try and infiltrate. In fact, I can name some of the infiltrators, and I know where they are. And the fact that within the anti-fracking community, it's just a loose-knit network of groups. So an infiltrator, yeah, they might have a negative impact here and here and here, but it's only 3 places out of hundreds, or even thousands. Whereas a hierarchy or pseudo-NGO, like Extinction Rebellion, which claim they have no leaders, but their leaders met with... how does that work? They have no leaders, but their leaders met with government ministers. Yes, you can see the construct at work here. This is not community activism. I got vilified for this. I was simply making the observation that the tried and tested PR formula using carefully selected and groomed wonderkin to gain the emotional investment, necessary to pull off an otherwise unimaginable political construct. And that's exactly what's doing here. And of course, with, Greed, I'm sure she's a lovely girl. Don't know her. I'm sure she's a lovely girl, and I'm sure she's well motivated at what she's doing. But of course, at 15, what she doesn't realize is how she is being manipulated. It's going to be interesting to see how this pans out on her health and well-being over the next decade or so as she moves from adolescence into adulthood. And, how she reacts if she does eventually realize that she has been on this ride that has been contrived for her, but it's not necessarily her who's calling the shots. And, this is the sort of thing that we're all subjected to. Here you have it. Here's the real picture, right, with Salesforce here, the fourth industrial revolution here, and John Kitson has also put together an excellent video called The Truth Behind Extinction Rebellion, which I think last time I checked, I think I might actually show a picture of it in a second, because it's had great traction. But here's how it gets presented in the environmentalist press. No reference to Salesforce, so this is all nicely punched out. Now, so I'd like to say, she is a victim here in a big way. And I can always rely. Jeremy Corbyn, it was a pleasure welcoming youth climate strikers and Greta Thunberg to Parliament. Young people will be the most affected by climate change. Seeing them take charge of their future is inspiring. Labour's committed to working with young people, campaigning to save our planet. Yet all the work we've been doing on trying to stop fracking, they don't want to talk to us for 6 years. But, as I can always rely on my good friend, Piers. And of course, Piers, for those who don't know, is Jeremy's brother. And of course, this is actually a screenshot of Piers speaking on this very platform 2 years ago, where he absolutely effectively came from a different angle, but really the same view as David Dubine presented to us yesterday. And Piers' tweet was actually brilliant. Listening to an ignorant, brainwashed child is deranged. I am an actual scientist of physics, meteorology, astrophysics, and climate, and say Greta Thunberg is wrong and suffers mental abuse by manipulative adults. So then, of course, the abuse starts, and Caroline Lucas responded with an abusive tweet, because the left can't deal with debate. I'm sure you realize this. The left cannot deal with debate, because they don't have the facts, they don't have the research, they rely on the emotional investment. And anybody who challenges that from any logical standpoint is then vilified. So, yeah, Piers pretty much summed up. But you know what? Extinction Rebellion has triggered the law of unintended consequences, because it has reignited the debate, and because of the access of a lot of the documentation, like Report from Iron Mountain, like Brzezinski's book, Between Two Ages, the Technotronic Era, like the Club of Rome, like Agenda 21. Now, because they're a bit behind schedule, changed to 2030. And of course, we see how all that fits in with everything that Deborah and David and others have presented over the weekend. So there we are. This is John's YouTube. It's just a screenshot. It's 18 minutes long. It's well worth watching. It's very well researched, John. The truth about Extinction Rebellion, and as of last night, or whenever it was I put this in, 32,000 views, which I have to say, for somebody who's relatively new to YouTube, is an outstanding number of views. And it's great to see, the younger generation, well, you're young to me, mate. It's great to see a younger generation coming through, doing their own research, and putting this material out there, because we have to unite the generations in this, and of course they're trying to divide the generations. This is going to be a war of youth versus the aged, if you like, or the non-contributors, and of course if they're autistic, then they're not going to have the capacity to see the bigger picture, and they'll just be wound up and pointed in the right direction. Give them an AK-47 or whatever, and the rest is history. So last, but by no means least, I think, I just want to draw your attention to this website. And this is deagle.com. And I'm just going to introduce you to it. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it because you can look at it for yourself. There's a lot of information here. But what it is a forecast. This is actually the 2025 projections. So you can click on that and see the 2017 data. But this is the projections for 2025. And it basically goes through every country in the world. It looks at the change in the population between now and 2025, change in GDP. And what we're seeing is incredibly, and I hadn't joined this dot until I heard David's presentation yesterday. Because I went back last night and I looked at this website and I looked at all the data and I realized that all the projections of increases and reductions in population relate directly to exactly what David was sharing with the food growing regions being pushed further south. So all the countries that are in the sort of subtropical, tropical, equatorial regions are going to see an increase in population because that seems to be where the growing areas are going to develop. And areas like Northern Europe effectively become almost, well, a hellhole, impossible to sustain life. And I'm not going to show you because I want you to go look at it for yourself. But the population of the UK is forecast by 2025 to be less than half what it is today. Now, the explanation, there is an explanation within this website which doesn't actually address anything that David has addressed. It comes up with a whole bunch of other reasons why this projection is being put forward. But you know that these socio-psychopaths have to tell us what they intend to do. Part of their belief system is that by telling us what they intend to do and us doing nothing, that's our acquiescence to their agenda. So it's really important that we now join the dots because in abstract this just looks absurd. It's like on what planet? And I know that's a terrible statement to make for the flat earthers. But on what planet would somebody predict that the population of the UK would effectively fall by more than 50% within 6 years? Unless you're aware of a piece of the jigsaw that isn't shared here. So people will look at this in abstract and dismiss it. But when they look at it in conjunction with the presentation that David showed us yesterday, it all falls into place. Well, exactly. It's the whole combination. I mean, they want to try and accelerate the culling, or at least get people into such a zombified state that they're not aware of what's going on around them. And Paul has a bingo sheet, and he ticks off the sort of phrases that I have a habit of using on a fairly regular basis. So I'm going to give you a mark on your box, because you'll be aware that I've often referred to those who wrongly believe themselves to be the rightful rulers of a planetary fiefdom. And I've been making that observation ever since certainly 2006. I first used it, I think, in a presentation called Hidden Agenda. And this is from The Guardian last year. And it was an article written by Brooke Harrington, professor of economic sociology at the Copenhagen Business School and the author of Capital Without Borders. And so I'm going to share this with you, and then I'm going to say, if you want to get a little bit more insight into why this observation and comment I think is very significant, that I'm going to show you in a second, then go and watch the Hidden Agenda presentation that I did in 2006, which is put Ian Crane, Hidden Agenda, you'll find it. Because this is what he wrote in this article about his experience of dealing with the bad behavior of the richest. It's a great article, but I'm just going to show one quote. And he says, the clients of this Geneva-based wealth manager also believe that they are descended from the pharaohs and that they were destined to inherit the earth. These guys are on a mission. They literally believe that they are taking us into a new Babylonian era, but they might just be actually taking us into a new Atlantean area, but the end of Atlantis. But what transpires is down to each and every one of us. The prognosis, if we do nothing, is clear. It's as clear as a bell. No debate in that whatsoever. If we do nothing, then that script will roll out. But the law of unintended consequences and an increasing number of people committing themselves to doing whatever they can, there's no template here, it's whatever each and every one feels they can contribute to raising the awareness and then making a direct contribution to bringing this down. They are running scared of us right now, which is why they're trying to accelerate the agenda. Yeah? And people say to me, and I know they've said to others, Ian, aren't you scared? Listen, it depends on your belief system, but this physical vehicle is nearing the end of its useful life. And then I'll go on to whatever happens next, and I will take the learning that I've got from my 28,000 days or whatever on this mortal coil, I'll take that learning into whatever it is I'm going to do next. And what I'm doing right now is, in many ways, based upon the learning that I've had from goodness knows where and when. And I'm just bringing that to bear right now, but I'm learning. And the day we stop learning is the day we might as well jog on. We learn and we contribute. But the other factor is, and that's why it's so important to get material out there, because I stick my stuff up on YouTube, has a few views every now and again, but even if I leave this mortal coil in a genuine, unfortunate accident, there's a lot of people who will never believe it's an accident. And then I'm relying on the Elvis effect kicking in, because my material might not have any value when I'm still here, but when I leave, then maybe people will start taking a look. And my thanks to a wonderful lady who's in the audience, and I won't embarrass her by naming her, but about a year or so ago, an old friend of mine who I've known since certainly the early part of the century contacted me and said, Ian, the likelihood is that your YouTube channel is going to be pulled down. And I said, well, that's always a possibility. He said, yeah, but you need to get it up on other platforms. And I said, yeah, like I have the time to do that. And he said, well, I have a solution. And so for the last 6 months or so, this young lady has devoted an enormous amount of time to downloading everything that I've got up on social media and re-uploading it on every other video platform that she can find. So thank you very much. So, all to play for, right? Yeah. Yeah? So what I want to do between now and going to lunch is to invite Mark back up on stage. Is Mark here? And I'd also like to invite John Kitson. Because John, I've referenced John, he's the guy behind the Extinction Rebellion video, and he's been doing some excellent presentations. Hopefully that'll be on eventually when the time comes. But John's been doing some excellent presentations, and we're in the process of setting up a tour. Unfortunately, it's taking a bit longer because I've outsourced the arrangement of that tour. But meanwhile, don't let that delay stop anybody from organizing an event in their community. And right now we have, at the very least, John, Mark, Barry Trower if the event's in the southwest, and I think there's a guy called Nicholas Cooper in Glastonbury. And over the next few months, because that's all we have now, months, we need people to be putting on events in whatever way, shape, or form they think appropriate within their communities to raise this awareness. And if you want an external speaker, I can't make any stronger recommendation than these guys. So, if anybody, what I'm going to say is, if anyone wants to ask a question, and I'm going to ask that you keep it to questions, not statements, can I ask that you come? Where's best for the cameras? Matt, just about here?
Lectern facing you.
Lectern facing me. Okay, so people who want to ask a question, can you come down here and line up? And because we literally only have 30 minutes, I'm going to ask you guys that in response to a question, keep the response as succinct as possible.
Hi, I'm Deborah Taveras with StopTheCrime.net. If you could give me an excellent explanation as to the burning of all the homes in California and elsewhere and how that relates to the wireless technology in people's homes. I don't think people are aware that they need to start removing some of this wireless. So if you could explain how this is causing interior combustibility, that would be great. Thank you.
Cheers, thanks for that, Deborah. Yeah, it's really important. Microwave radiation, a number of different antennas, you start to see cross-wave frequencies, you start to see the breakdown of molecular structures. It's basically a pulsed energy wave vibration. You start to see some very interesting things. The more antennas you have, the more the risk, so the more it actually breaks down the environment. You start to see gassing off hydrocarbons. So when you actually see an ignition, if it's an EMP or other, that's why the bodies disappear. That's why Grenfell Tower, the bodies actually aren't there. They've actually been cremated.
Okay. Jennifer?
Thank you. I wanted to ask the acronym of secret militarized armaments in residential technologies. Is that on an official site? Does that come from an industry, or is it something that's been made up by the alternative community?
I couldn't comment.
Oh.
No.
Because if it's official, that alone is
Well,
enough to make people very, very alarmed.
It may not be official, but it's certainly the case, isn't it?
Hi.
Get up a bit.
Right, okay. I hope this is not a naive question. We've heard that the EMFs have difficulty getting through leaves and wet leaves, and also that they can penetrate concrete and everything else. Is that just to do with the wavelength, or is there other reasons?
It's all down to the spectrum. Lower spectrums, you can travel through concrete. Higher spectrum, you have trouble. So, and it's attenuation in there, and it's also pulse rates. So there's quite a lot of technicalities there. But the lie about these transmitters at close proximity, they're sub-gigahertz. They can see into an urban environment up to 15 to 20 kilometers minimum. So when you saw the pictures there by the OS, you see how they were breaking down. They're actually breaking down the whole fabric of that's urban radar. So it actually looks deep into the urban environment very, 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 very easily with sub-gig.
Okay.
Cheers. How can we produce or obtain promotional material to educate the public? This is on like bumper stickers, stickers to put on street lights, whatever.
Okay. You know what? We had a motto in the anti-fracking campaign, because, and please don't take what I'm going to say personally, okay? Well, funny you should say that. But you know, we had a lot of suggestion at the time of the start of the anti-fracking campaign, and we had to change the vocabulary. So you have to change the vocabulary from how about, why don't you, what about, to I am doing. So the ethos is, if you see a job, you got it. So, you know, bumper stickers, you know, they can all be purchased relatively cheaply. Same with flyers. You know, you can always find somebody with the skills to put something together. So, you know, don't wait for somebody else. That's what they rely on. They rely on everybody waiting for somebody else. But if we take the initiative and just get on with it, then people will follow our lead.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good answer. Hello. This topic wasn't
top of my agenda.
Just come this way.
Can I arrange for each of you?
Just that far away from
Sorry,
the mic.
perfect. Thank you. Is that better?
Yeah.
I'll start again. I live in Ramsey on the Isle of Man, where Shaw Mobile have just asked to put a 5G transmitter. I would like to invite each of you separately, one of you to come and debate the safety case only with Manx Telecom, a quoted company, and the other on another event to come and debate safety case with Shaw Mobile. Will you both do that if I can arrange it in 3 months?
Well, if I'm not in prison, then...
Yeah, we'll sort it. We'll get you there. Will you come? Will you come? Thank you. I'll do it.
Hold it there.
Hold it, yeah.
Yeah.
Right. I'm sure a lot of people here will...
Question.
Sorry?
It's a question, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Just
But
sure.
I'm asking the question on
Okay.
behalf of lots of other people,
Okay.
I hope. Now, I live in a small community. We've got LED streetlights already installed. And yet I cannot seem to raise awareness amongst the community. How did you get it going, John?
Good question.
So we've had little local demonstrations where we've given out leaflets and maybe someone on a table, and we've taken down names and emails and where are people from. And then what we've then done within those localities, you've then got people who will leaflet for you. Now, what did we do with Buckfast-Lee? We had 250 people turn up where Ian and I spoke. It was a great success. 50 people we had to turn away. It was full up. We had flyers going up on notice boards. I actually went into shops and I said, may I put a flyer on your shop window? If that was not possible, I said, okay, may I have it sellotaped to your counter in front of where you're working? Then people can go in and see it without them disappearing. If that's not possible, may I leave some there, or may I have some in your staff room so a group of the staff could see it? I got on the UK column guys, promoted it, Ian promoted it, so I put it out there, but I think it's getting, what Extinction Rebellion are doing, they're getting lots and lots of contact details at their events, names, contacts, and then they're following up with those people. So it's about getting as many people locally. We've now got in Buckfast-Lee, since we held that event, we've got a local group that are meeting up every month about discussing action plans to stop 5G. And this is, you know, exactly Ian Crane with his fracking tour, getting the local groups up and running. They're working by themselves. Local power. This is the key. So getting stuff like that done. I'm planning to get some stickers done that I'm going to put up on the website, 5gawareness.com, and then people can just put those up on lampposts all over the place. That's what Extinction Rebellion are doing. But getting contacts within the local community and connecting with them, getting them to do leafleting, getting someone to organize it, a group of you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Quick.
Yeah, well, quickly. Sorry, I'm a voice in the wilderness at the moment in the place I do. So I've got your card. If I can contact you, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Simple observation. I haven't heard anything about people's trees in their gardens.
1, 2. Trees in gardens.
Trees in gardens, not yet.
No.
The telecoms companies are drafting laws where they can actually come onto private land and move your trees. You didn't know about that, but they've actually already drafted the legislation to remove them.
And actually, in some local authorities where they've got social housing, or it's not social anymore, is it? It's private landlords, but managed on behalf of the local authorities, and where some of those properties have conifers or lelandai in the garden, they are literally moving the people out so they can remove those trees from the gardens. I mean, they are determined to, plant them. Plant whatever you can.
Hi.
Hold it there.
Oh, okay.
Come here.
Where I live in the southeast, this is Epping and Ongar Council. They've built many, many houses. They've put all the infrastructure for 5G, and they've also been around the countryside changing all the telegraph poles to put them higher up, so we know that that's what you've said today is correct. They've also, it's a farming community, so they've been talking about tractors which don't require drivers. So we know that it's a full-on thing with no consultation whatsoever. Now, I've been talking to people and they think I'm mad. But what I was going to say to you earlier was, if you're talking about 5G, you're obviously extremely
keep it close,
knowledgeable about what you're talking about. If I were to talk about it, can I just pull the bits from it that I understand? I mean, obviously, what you said about getting the community to, with the leaflets and everything, but, I can't do it in the way that you obviously talk about it.
For everybody that doesn't know enough about it, the best thing to do is this 5G apocalypse video. What I'm going to suggest to people, watch it, invite people into your home, put it on the big screen, get a couple of bottles of wine, you need a bottle of vodka after you've watched it. What John said marries in with that. Because obviously once you've got a half a dozen people in your living room, have a chat about it, talk about what you're going to do in your community, and like the advice that John gave before to Ideal, get some stickers made, posters, there's lots of websites there, we've got one, John's got one, there's a lot of stuff out there. Get it into your local community. We have caught this early. Make no mistake about it, they didn't think anybody would have worked it out. Fortunately for us, I live in Gateshead where a lighting guy threw one at me, and you saw it before. It's a weapon.
To add to that very briefly. Yeah, there's also, just to add, if I'm walking around, I was waiting at the bus stop the other day, and there's a video on YouTube, 5G in 5 minutes, which is up in the video section on my website. So the 5G apocalypse, absolutely great. But if there's someone, they don't have time, and a lot of people don't have attention spans, quickly, 5G in 5 minutes, you play them that. It's got the Blumenthal clip included in that. Very powerful. And this guy said to me, oh, I'm going to start looking into that more after showing him that at the bus stop. So every day I'm going around showing like half a dozen people that video, and it's got some people on board.
And by the way, I have to say that the best way to learn about something is to talk about it. Yeah? Because when you start talking about it, someone's going to ask you a question that you don't know the answer to. And even, you know, when I started doing the Fractured Future tour on fracking 6 years ago now, but when I first started that, I was getting a lot of questions, good questions, and I thought, I just need to go and refresh myself. So anybody who asks you a question, that's a trigger then to go and check for yourself. And then obviously, the more people ask you questions, the more you're learning and gaining the confidence about talking about it publicly. So yeah, go for it. And you start talking small just in your front room, as John says. Then take it up to the village hall and just see where it goes.
I live in California, and in Mill Valley, California, we temporarily banned it. They passed that through the little city council, but they asked us to pass out information. I guess they gave us some things, and I posted it on Nextdoor, and I was attacked. And these, not physically, but these engineers with language I didn't understand. One person was with the power company and told me I didn't know what I was talking about. I was a conspiracy theorist. And anyway, it's just hard to deal with that in writing. So I was thinking if I had talking points with footnotes so that I can say, this is it, that's the research, it's back there. This is it, that's the research. But like 10 talking points that I could cover quickly, that's, okay. So that's where my second question is technical. So where I live, with Xfinity, when you hook up to your Wi-Fi, it says 5G. I have been told there's a difference between 5G Wi-Fi and 5G mobile. And I don't understand that. I heard we have 5G Wi-Fi now, but we don't have 5G mobile, and that 5G mobile is the worst one.
The industry are very deceptive. 5 gigahertz is a telecoms signal, 5G is a weapon. That's the difference. Any organization that has 5G attached to it, make no mistake about it, that is a crime against humanity. This is an untested, unregulated technology. It's in breach of the Nuremberg Code. They've broken the law. It is the law that's been broken, and that's the key to bringing this down.
Lou.
Yeah, you mentioned the cutting of the trees and the excuses that they're giving for doing it. And we were in Ireland, we were in Killarney back in March of this year, and the street was lined with tree stumps about 12 inches off the sidewalk. And we asked, why are these trees being removed? We were told that, well, they drop leaves on the sidewalk, and it's slippery, and it's a hazard for the people, and they wanted to remove the liability that the city had. So, and we stood up and he says, no, it's BS. Yeah, it's bad science. So if you go to the link on stopthecrime.net, you can find a lot of information about the 5G, which I would encourage people to do. So thank you for being able to plug that in. Oh, and PG&E fires.
PG&E? Oh, yeah, PG fires, yeah, the power group. Clive.
Could you just clarify on Deborah's question about Paradise, California? Are you saying that those houses were burnt to the ground by utilizing the pieces of technology within the house?
Yes. Absolutely.
So that could happen to anybody's house if they've got a router or a smart fridge or what?
Or Grenfell Tower?
I'm going to say the more smart devices you have in your home, the more potential it is for crosswave frequencies where you start to break down molecular structures. We're starting to see nuclear reactor concrete bund walls breaking down. Harwell, we've got Hunterston, we've got British Columbia, Professor Curtis Bennett studying British Columbia, breaking down the bund wall. This is energy, and the more denser the materials, the more potential for harm. So you'll start to see the fabric of cities, bridges, infrastructure starting to fall down because of the crosswave frequencies. This is an absolute catastrophic, unregulated, untested, unforeseen phenomena from this smart meter, smart device, smart this. These antennas have 15, 20, 40, 50 mile. Those things I've just shown you in Gateshead have got a 3,000 kilometre footprint. 3,000 kilometres. And that turned around to people, and because sub-gigahertz radar, 3,000 kilometres and above. So the lie is, it doesn't travel very far. You'll hear the main narrative, these signals don't travel very far. It is BS.
Just to add, can I very briefly? There was a house that exploded in Buckfastleigh. Now, 2 days before that explosion happened, there was a smart meter installed in that property. I spoke with a neighbor. Her son rescued the lady from that property. The meter was blown open. So just to add to that.
Yep. Smart meters and fires.
Yep.
Yeah.
Kia ora, Mark. I'm Leah from New Zealand, and I'm just wondering how we can go about protecting ourselves. I mean, I don't know whether or not you know about Mike Emery, who makes orgon bubbles, and then also there's tower busters that we make orgonite against mobile masks. So I'm just wondering whether or not there's anything that we can do against these things, these antennae, maybe EPM, electromagnetic pulse guns, mobile things like that.
It's not exactly a subject I know a great deal about. I'm more of a weapons systems expert than what I am understanding about some of the nuances about protecting yourself. Protecting yourself from 5G, forget it. It's a weapon. It's not, you can mitigate, there's lots of ways. You can wear clothing, you can mitigate these type of signals so it's a little bit healthier. You can eat better diet, better genetics, all those sort of things matter in relation to the exposure to the background radiation. This will not save you from the weapon. The weapon system's a focused signal. I can take a city out. When we saw 9/11, believe us, that 9/11 building came part down. There was a direct energy weapon, and that's why it blew away across Manhattan.
I think the other observation I'd make is that I think it's important that we don't make any statement about something that can protect you, because we need people not to think that there's something that can protect them. We need people to stop it. Yeah. And if people think that they can wear a Faraday cage, or a Faraday cage suit, they go, I don't have a problem with 5G, I just put on my Faraday cage suit. Well, we've got to stop it. So if you think that there's something that you can do, in your own house or around your area, then go do it, for sure.
Absolutely.
Question for Mark. Ken from Hertfordshire. I had a chill when I saw 450 volt on that capacitor. Yeah, that's a huge amount of.
That's industrial electricity.
Yeah,
It's a weapon. And this is the lie. You see, the voltage in your phone's 3.5 volts. A normal piece of equipment in the house, a light management system, it would have been stepped down to about 12 volts. So when I actually got my hands on it, I didn't tell people early doors, because let's put it like this, right? When I knew I'd put this information out, there'd be a lot of naysayers, there'd be a lot of negativity, because obviously they don't want the story getting out. When I've just explained to you, it's got 450 volts as a capacitor on that board, on the mains, believe us, it's a weapon. That's all it is. That's why I can't switch the lights on and off. There's lights on all over Gateshead. Ian's seen it. John's seen it. Can't control the lights because it's not a control management system for lights.
And I think that one of the things as well that you notice in Gateshead, I mean, I spend most of my time living, in a fairly rural area. And I love the bird song. You get it here. Go to Gateshead, you won't hear a bird. Mark took me for a walk. And he said, while we're walking, he said, just tell me how many birds you spot. And I think we saw one crow and maybe a magpie flying in the distance, but there's nothing else. The sparrows have gone, the thrushes have gone, you know, it's decimated.
Yeah, can I ask one more question? Why don't we take them down?
We can't take them down. What the problem is, there's not enough of us. This is an awareness campaign. Once there's enough of us, I mean, it's like me. I mean, there has been a few of the lampposts have had a bit of trouble in Gateshead. Obviously,
stop laughing.
Total mystery, by the way. Had nothing to do with me.
Well, actually, the council did try and allude that Mark had shimmied up the lampposts and broken off the antenna at the top. And Mark said, "You think so?"
Well, the last question is a little bit like I wanted to say. What happens if one of us or anybody wakes up one morning and one of these wretched things is, you know, this far from their front window? In all seriousness, not to joke about it, what are we supposed to do? Are we supposed to take the law into our own hands and take it down, or go for the proper channels? What is somebody supposed to do?
Well, you're not taking the law into your own hands. The law's pretty straightforward. Section 3 of the criminal justice system, it's one of the things they've got us up in court for. You are entitled to defend yourself. This is a weapons system. This is Great Britain. This is the British judicial system, and that law allows you to act, as long as it's proportionately.
So it'd be you would say just take the bloody thing down, yeah?
Well, I couldn't tell anybody to do that.
Or
The barristers over there will tell us off.
And it is rather strange that also in Gateshead, I gather that there's been a rush on buying concrete mix. And apparently some of these inspection panels have fallen away from the front of the lights, and the cavity has been filled with concrete. I've no idea how that happens.
There's been some great films mentioned on YouTube. Can I just ask everybody to like and subscribe to their channels, comment on these videos. It will help the rest of the community to get out and see these films. Really important. Please support these films and channels.
Thank you.
Is there any mileage in using...
Come forward.
Sorry. Is there any mileage in using consumer power, like not buying certain products or supporting certain companies? Is that something you...
It's probably an idea, but it's probably more important for people to... It's probably more important for people to get organised and contact the MPs. Get that letter knocked in and terrifies them to death.
Okay.
The antennae on top of the street lamps is not used for turning the lamps on and off. Do they just do it the conventional way with a switch when they turn the lamps on and off?
Well, normally light systems, you've got power line which you actually send a signal up through the cable. That piece of hardware there, like you could see, it had a number of signal systems, had a number of antennas on it.
Okay. This one?
Yeah.
Okay.
What was it? Go on, just repeat it.
Yeah, the turning on and off of the lights. How is that done?
There's lots of technology there for switching lights on and off. You saw the small image of the 12-volt switch a light on and off device. The other thing's something completely different. That's not there to switch the light on and off, and that's the lie that I saw a document yesterday from a chap who came and gave me it, that your councils are telling you this is a light control manager, right? It is a lie. They are lying to you. This is battlefield interrogation system at best, and a battlefield weapon system. They are starting to remove some of these lighting systems in Gateshead as we speak. Because what happened, I've caught them with putting a weapon in. All right, the company behind it, Harvard Technology, went into administration to cover up. Because all that thing has one purpose. It's here to see you, target acquire, and kill you.
Okay, I'd ask that nobody else come forward now, because this will be the last two questions.
As what they're doing is obviously illegal, and you said there are precedents
Two for two, yeah. Okay. You said there, we can use certain legislation that allows you to act. And I looked up the Human Rights Act, and of course, Article 2, the right to life, is something binding on all councils. But how can we bridge this gap to get MPs and people that you mentioned in your talk about some people in the judiciary won't want their grandchildren to die? So how do we bridge this gap and get it where the power is? That's my question.
The barrister who's representing me here today, in the workshops this afternoon, we're going to discuss exactly how we take legal action to bring these criminals to justice. The British justice system is corrupt, has been corrupted. However, it hasn't all been corrupted. There was an agent at the last case. They are still panicking because they haven't got them all in their pocket. And all we need, as in the first case, is a better, honourable judge who understands that when he looks at that bundle, he doesn't want to die. I've never met anybody that wants to die. And when they understand what's in that bundle and we put that case, they can hold these authorities to account. It is not the government, they have broken the law. We have laws here. This is not some fascist state. There may be a lot of people at Gateshead Council, the executives may want to think that they're in Eastern Germany. They may want to think that they're the Fourth Reich. They're not. And we are far too early. If we'd wait another 4 or 5 years, I'll tell you now, you'd be in the Fourth Reich. But we're too early. And it's up to every single person, and I mean you, in this room, to go from here with this information. I know it's unbelievable. I scientifically believe in it. Really, I do. This is absolutely appalling. But we have to act, because it's real. It is the truth. They've tried to discredit me in the past. This is the truth. We'll talk about this afternoon about how we take action against these criminals.
Quickly, yeah.
On the 24th of May, I'm meeting with my local MP, Sarah Wollaston, at the village surgery. Now, a lot of MPs' emails are scanned before they actually reach the MP, so I'm meeting her in person, and I'm actually going to print off Mark's templates, the notices of liability, and I'm reaching out to all my friends in the local area. I'm going to get them each to sign one, and then I'm going to give her a couple or 3 dozen of these letters to saying, I'm holding you indictable for this crime. And this is what we have to do. We have to meet our MPs in person. We have to go to these council meetings and hold these people responsible.
Yes.
Okay. Go. Hold it up to you.
Okay.
Like that.
Hi, I've got one of these lovely LED streetlights being put outside my house a few weeks ago. It hasn't got a sticky uppy antennae thing, it's got a flat grey dome on the top. Is that a 5G transmitter?
To put a sub-gigahertz antenna in, you need about that much of space. So they can either be built in, if it's got a big, heavy bit at the back, it's probably got a 5G sitting underneath. If it's got a dome on, they're manufacturing the parts not as look like the antenna, they look like a light sensor. If it's that big, there's a very high possibility, without actually climbing up and ripping one off and giving me a look at the technology, then I'd be able to tell you exactly what it was, but I'm pretty much sure if it's about that big, you've got 5G.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, John. And you know, you guys are going to be really busy over the next few months. Yeah. Stay safe. Now, it's great that there is some confidence in the legal system, and Mark is right. Every now and again, you get a judge who does have a conscience and does the right thing. And, some of the quotes that I think I shared with you the other day with Justice Nicholas Lorraine Smith, who was the guy who presided over the Newton hearing with David and Lynn. And of course, he was hamstrung because David had pleaded guilty. And David alluded to why he did that. I'm not going to go into that again, but he alluded to why he did that. But nonetheless, he pleaded guilty. So, Nicholas Lorraine Smith was already between a rock and a hard place. So the issue for him was, did he acquiesce to the MHRA request for an 8-year jail sentence, or was there reason, mitigation, for him to give him a lesser sentence? And that was why he called for a Newton hearing. And a Newton hearing in the UK is where you have the opportunity to present the evidence that you would have presented had you not pleaded guilty. But it still needs to be heard, or the judge decides it still needs to be heard. And Nicholas Lorraine Smith, he made the observation, he said, this is not a court of morality. It's a court of law. And I sensed that he was really struggling with that observation. Because once you enter into a situation where you've got a court of law that doesn't take account of morality, it's a corporate court. It is simply a corporate court to protect the corporatocracy. And he knew that, and he was really trying to find that fine line, and I acknowledged that. And he obviously was compelled to give David a jail sentence, but the 12 months that he gave him was a long way from the 8 years that the MHRA wanted. And of course, under British law, he serves half. So he served the first part in jail, and now he's tagged, and hopefully he'll have a little bit more liberty, as it were, from the middle of the year. And with the fracking, I have personally challenged, as litigant in person, a number of the injunctions, and just been thwarted. And I have made the observation in every single case that what's working here is a situation where the corporations are effectively looking to establish a raft of supra-parliamentary law. Because, for example, if I stand in front of a truck in the road and decide I'm going to slow walk that truck, then under criminal law, the maximum fine that I'm faced is £1,000. It's certainly not a jailable offence. It's £1,000. It's not even a recordable offence. They don't even take your fingerprints for it. But the corporations go to the courts and they get the judge to put a ban on protest. And my argument was that it's not for the courts to make that call. If these corporations want a ban on protest, then they should be going to Parliament and getting Parliament to introduce legislation which bans protest, which of course is protected by the Human Rights Act, Articles 10 and 11, the freedom of expression. But it's not going to happen. So in the lower courts, anyway, a good friend of mine, Joe Boyd, he challenged the INEOS injunction, and Justice Morgan made the expected ruling and granted in favour of the corporations. In this case, it was INEOS, the new sponsor of the Sky cycling team. Anyway, at appeal a few weeks ago, the Court of Appeal overturned that judgment of Judge Morgan and reinstated the Human Rights Act in the UK. So basically, the Court of Appeal have now ruled that it is unlawful for the judiciary to establish a decision which is effectively creating legislation preventing protest. It's not for the judiciary to do that. So after challenging everything in every way possible, finally, when we get to the Court of Appeal, we get the right decision. So, and I've said to Mark, look, Mark, I know you're committed and you absolutely believe that this is a breach of law and it should be a done and deal. But it ain't that easy. And we just got to keep chipping away, and we have to be prepared for multiple court cases. And this is, again, what we've done with the communities. Because, there's no template. Communities have launched judicial reviews and challenges to the industry in their areas, and the industry doesn't know where the next legal attack's coming from. And in every case, it costs them money. And I'll close with the final anecdote from the last injunction that I challenged. And once again, we had, I think, a good judge, but he was quite a junior judge, so I knew we were onto hiding to nothing, because the judge that had made the ruling, the one I just talked about, Justice Morgan, was quite a senior judge, and this judge wasn't about to overrule him. So I knew we were on a hiding to nothing, but we presented a good argument. And anyway, at the end of the hearing, where we'd made some changes, managed to get some changes to the injunction, but nonetheless, fundamentally, the injunction was still in place. And the barrister for IGAS stood up and said, well, we'd like to put in a claim for expenses. And we think that Mr. Crane should be responsible for all of our costs. And he said, and I quote, "This is not Mr. Crane's first rodeo." And I felt like saying, and it won't be my last either. Anyway, so he said, and so we seek £112,000. So anyway, I did have a barrister. This is the only case I've ever had a barrister. Very good young barrister, Paul Powsland. He did a really good job defending the tree protesters in Sheffield, and who were also being charged with breach of the injunction. Anyway, so Paul stood up and said, "Well, actually, I think that INEOS should be paying my costs." Because he said, "We've successfully made a few changes." And the judge said, "Well, I'm going to stop you there because that isn't going to happen." And he said, let me just get a feel for things. He said, "How much are you charging Mr. Crane?" And of course, initially, he said some ridiculous number, which is what he would have charged IGAS had we won the case. And the judge said, "Well, no, I don't think Mr. Crane's paying you that now, is he?" So he had to admit that we had an agreement that I was going to pay him £1,800. Which was actually being paid by the local community that I was representing. So the judge said, "Oh, okay, £1,800. So anyway, then IGAS barrister stood up again and he made another case for getting 112. And the judge said, "Well, look, I'm going to sort of cut this discussion." He said, "I have in my head that Mr. Crane should pay something in the region of about £3,000. So he went back to INEOS and he said, "Do you want to reflect on that?" And they said, no, we think he should pay £112,000. So thank you. So he went back to my barrister and said, "So Mr. Crane's paying you £1,800? I went, "Yes." He said, "Okay, so £3,000 less £1,800, I'm awarding IGAS £1,200 in costs." Which actually, frankly, I don't think IGAS can be bothered to even come chase. Because they know I have some history and they know that I can run the courts ragged when people try and come after me for money. So, you just have to keep chipping away. You have to work on the basis that it doesn't matter, you're going to get knocked back, but every knockback is a learning experience. And you look then for another way. Okay, that didn't work, so how can we do this? So we have a massive advantage here because, like I said, fracking only affected a relatively small part of the country, about 25% or so, mainly in the north. 5G is going to impact on everyone. So everyone becomes a player here. And because, obviously the effort that's going in, not just in this country, but globally to raise awareness of this, I know that one way or another, we will win this, and it will be a seminal part in changing the future, thanks to the law of unintended consequences. Yeah. Well, that's perfect timing. So we end the morning session, and that's the end, really, of this part of the conference. I know some people are leaving us now or just after lunch, and others will be leaving us after the workshops this afternoon. But I just want to say, you guys have, I know, contributed to a wonderful event. I mean, people have been coming telling me it's their first time at an AV, and they've booked already. And I gather from Nicola that over half of the tickets for AV11 have already been sold. So, no pressure on me then for next year, right? And I will do whatever I can. And I'm sure those who give me the help that I get, I'm sure that we will pull together an event that will just take it to the next level. And of course, potentially we'll be in a new reality, and that will be a reality that we have determined rather than those who think they're the rightful rulers of a planetary fiefdom. So thanks very much. And thank you. Thank you very much.